or of clinical relevance? Sige. Can you guys remember your studies? Sige, sige, sige. Give me a gram-negative organism or gram-negative cocci that is of clinical relevance. Somebody raise their hand. Somebody, Valiant. Sige, Valiant.
Moraxella and Vironella.
All right, wonderful. Very good, very good. Anak, bumalik ka na. Nawala na ang disappointment ko sa iyo ng little bit. Thank you so much, anak. All right, very good. Yeah, that's correct. We're going to talk about, aside from Neisseria species, we're going to talk about Vilunilla Vilunilla and Moraxella species. Okay, so please be mindful that um, these are also important questions that you might expect in the exams. So please, please, please. But I think you should focus more on Neisseria species. Okay, because a lot of the question banks that I've noticed, that I've scrolled through, have always been have mostly been related to Neisseria. Okay? So, padaanan lang natin si gram-negative cocci kasi nga at least meron kayong idea, di ba? Alright, so let's talk about the morphological characteristics of most Neisseria species. So, most Neisseria species are gram-negative coffee bean shaped or kidney bean shaped Diplococci or diplococci. Anong ibig sabihin nun, sir? Lagi silang magkadikit. Okay? Right? Lagi silang ganun. Parang paano ko ba siya i-describe sa inyo? Ayan, yan, yung ginagawa ni Mark Segi. Yeah, that one. Very good. Very good. So, very rarely do you see them without each other. Bakit? Ano ba kasing meron dito sa mga organisms na to? Kasi nga, di ba remember in our first discussion, one of the most important structures needed for bacterial syngamy or bacterial reproduction of some microorganisms is what? Is binary fission. Yung iba binary fission lang mag-separate. Yung iba kailangan ng transfer of of genetic material from one parent cell to another parent cell. That's what you call what? Bacterial conjugation. All right? So don't forget that one. And it's facilitated by what organelle? Okay, balikan natin yung unang-una nating discussion about cellular structure. What is the organelle or cellular structure that is responsible for bacterial conjugation? Okay. Pabigyan ko na naman kayo. Ay, ayan na si Nigel talaga. Ayan na, nagtatagisan talaga si Nigel at si James Paul pag mahirap na mga questions. Gusto ko talaga yan. Si Nigel muna. Sorry, naunahan ka James Paul. Sige, go Nigel.
Pilay po.
Ano?
Pilay.
Anong pilay? Hoy,
For bacterial conjugation po,
anong pilay? Nakikilay. As in, nabati yung buto. Ganon.
pilay.
Okay, pilay. Alright. So, P-I-L-I. Anong klaseng pilay? There's two types of pilay. Adherence pilay and sexual pilay. Right? Alright. So, sexual pilay yun yung gamit. Di makala. Kaya nga akala ko din, Sir Marco, di makalakad na pilay. Yung nasagasaan yung metatarsals niya, hindi makalakad. Ganon. Nasagasaan, nasagasaan ng 10-wheeler truck. Ganon. No? Pilay pala. Sabi. So, sabi ko sa inyo, there has something, your answers has bearing. Ako, baka mamaya, kung saan ang naintindihan ni Sir Manuel is napilay. Alright? So, the exemption to this characteristic is, of course, Neisseria elongata. So, from the name itself, it's elongated. So, I don't really need to discuss anything further, right? So, yeah. So, these are the general characteristics, the general morphological structure of of Neisseria species. Okay, except Neisseria elongata. Now, aside from morphological characteristics, how is Neisseria elongata different from other Neisseria species based on biochemistry? So based on biochemical identification or based on biochemical analysis, all species of Neisseria are catalase positive. Okay? Except for Neisseria elongata. Alright? So, kaya ko kayo pinagagawa ng ano class? Ng algorithm. Ang gusto kong makita doon, gram positive, gram negative. Sa umpisa pa lang, sa umpisang-umpisa pa lang, gram positive, gram stain reaction. Gram stain reaction, yung nasa unang tier. 'Di ba may tier list? Gram stain, 'di ba? Then afterwards, positive or negative? Positive or negative? Pupunta ka sa negative side. Catalase positive or catalase negative? 'Di ba? Mga ganon. So, ganon sana nakita ko sana kanina. Pero what can I do? 'Di ba? What that's the that's that's what we would expect from somebody who has not created algorithms yet. So at least kahit papaano meron kayong idea. Now, let's talk about another thing that's important. Catalase positive lahat ng Neisseria species, except for Neisseria elongata. And we need to add another thing, oxidase positive. So ano ang klase ng ano niya? Metabolism niya. Is it fermentative or oxidative? Meaning, does it utilize oxygen to produce to produce sugars or to produce energy? Basically, it's through fermentation. So you use the oxidase enzyme to ferment certain sugars, right? Now, species of Neisseria are said to be capnophilic, which means that they require what percentage of CO2? Balikan natin yung question natin sa unang-una. Unang-una, bacterial metabolism or nutrition. You went to bacterial nutrition. Okay. Capnophilic organisms, which means that they require what percentage of CO2? Important din yan. You guys remember? Eliza.
5 to 10% po.
Very good. Yay! Congratulations. Bigyan nga ng jacket yan. Ganun. Diba? Bigyan ng jacket. Diba? Alright. So yeah, very good. Congrats. Thank you so much for participating. That is actually the answer that I am looking for. Okay. Now, let's move on to your next question. Oh, sorry. Alright. What's the most important pathologic determinant of Neisseria? What's the most important pathologic determinant of Neisseria? Kanina sinagot na ni Nigel.
Pilay.
Pilay. Napilay na naman. Very good. Thank you, Eliza. Bakit? Bakit siya ang pinaka-important? Not only does it make it more adherent to cells, but it also makes it highly, highly what? Highly, it makes it much more fertile, kumbaga, charot, fertile tuloy. It makes it much more reproductive, right? So it's capable of so much more because of the pili. Or another name for pili is fimbrae. Okay? Fimbrae. Now, let's go to Neisseria gonorrhoeae. Gonorrhoeae, depending on how, doesn't matter how you pronounce it, as long as you have an idea of what this N gonorrhoeae is, whatever it is, this organism is. So there are two tests. There's one test that you know as the presumptive identification that's used for the presumptive identification. Presumptive. Okay, meaning it's not a confirmatory test. You are just making presumptions. Okay? So, anong ibig sabihin nun? Parang screening test. Sabi niya, ay, tumubo sa Thayer Martin, tas gram-negative Diplococcus. Meron pa lang doon, meron pa palang ibang mga organisms, di ba, na Neisseria lactamica. Pwede din siyang ganon. So, presumptive test lang siya. So, ibig sabihin, baka Neisseria gonorrhoeae, maybe not, maybe another organism, we don't know. But at least you know that it is presumptive. And one of the most, one of the tests that we use, one of the tests is, one of the tests that we use for the presumptive diagnosis of N gonorrhoeae is, of course, superoxole test. Now, the reagent is quite familiar to you guys. It's hydrogen peroxide. Okay? What test do we use hydrogen peroxide? What test would you use hydrogen peroxide with? Sige, what test? Huwag niyo sabihin nakalimutan niyo. Sasakalin ko kayo. Nigel, sasakalin kita. Minty, ha? Sasakalin kita. Huwag mo sabihin nakalimutan mo. Hydrogen peroxide lang. Alsin niyo, don't mind 30%. Okay? Don't mind the 30%. Nigel, sige.
Catalase.
Catalase. Yeah, very good. Di ba? Catalase. But in this case, we're using 30%. 30%. We're using 30%. Okay? So that's the only difference between normal catalase. How many percent do we use? How many percent do we use for catalase test? How many percent do we use for catalase test? And what is the positive result? Ayan na naman yung mga tanungan ni sir eh. Parang pala isipan, nakakaloka. Ano ba, sir? Sige. You can type it on the chat. Don't worry. Nahiya magsalita. How many percent of hydrogen peroxide do we need? 3%. Very good. Very, very good, James Paul. 3%. Tignan mo, kaya nga siya super oxol. Kasi super, so it's like 100, so it's like 10 times more than the original dose of of hydrogen peroxide. Diba, diba, diba? But what is the positive result? Positive result is basically the same thing. It's effervescence. Okay? Alright? Ano yung effervescence? Anong kaartihan na naman yan, sir? What's effervescence nga, Minty? Bula. Yeah, simple as that. Yeah, it's correct. It's quite simple. Not he's not flexing his knowledge, di ba? Kasi alam niya I'm disappointed in him. Hindi kasi siya sumasagot ngayon. Anak ha. Pero binabawi mo ang sarili mo ngayon. Bumabawi ka ngayon, anak. Okay? Don't worry, hindi ko pa rin tatanggalin na air to the Iron Throne ka. To the Iron Becky Throne ka. Huwag kang mag-alala. Okay? Alright. Now, let's move on to the test that may be used to confirm Neisseria gonorrhoeae. Who can give me confirmatory tests for Neisseria gonorrhoeae? There's two. Okay, Alexis, anak number 2.
Isa lang po alam ko, sir, fermentation test po.
Okay, very good. Okay, that's good. That's fine. You can also use culture methodologies, right? Fermentation, specifically glucose fermentation. 'Di ba? Bumabawi ang isa kong anak. Natutuwa ako. Natutuwa ako sa isa kong anak. Isang ano nga, isang clap nga, Valiant, yung clap ko. Hindi yung clap ko. Yeah, yes. Yes, that's how you do it. All right, very good. Okay. Now. Gonorrhea causes what forms? Causes what forms dapat yan? Include leads to what forms? Gonorrhea leads to what forms of infections in male versus females? All right? So there are two types of diseases. Of course, wala namang cervix ang mga lalaki. So, of course, cervicitis sa babae. Sa lalaki, purulent urethritis. Ito yung tinatawag natin sa Tagalog na ano, Mark? Ano, Mark? Hindi ko sinabi na meron ka niyan. Nakakaloka ka. Nakakaloka ka, Mark. Hindi ko sinabi. Bakit ka tumawa? Wala naman akong sinabi na nagkaroon ka ng ganyan. Ano ba?
Noong una po mali
Ulo.
kasi yung type
Very
ko.
good. Very good, Mark. Kayo talaga. Ito mga lalaki talaga kapag pagka-related sa body parts nila, tumatawa. Buti pa si Minty, basta kabaklaan, tumatawa. Di ba? Ganon. Thank you so much. All right, now, which gender na lang, which gender would a gram stain of Neisseria gonorrhoeae be more sensitive? Ayan ang mga questions sa exams. Huwag niyo kakalimutan. Males or females? Gender ha, hindi sexual orientation. Iba, gender at sexual orientation. Nakakaloka kayo. Nakakaloka kayo. Baka mamaya may maglagay dyan ng trans. Sasampalin ko talaga kayo. Sasampalin ko talaga kayo. Pag may naglagay ng trans dyan, wag niyo akong binibiloso po. Gigigil ako. Alright, everybody is in agreement that it's on the male side, alright? Particularly in the penile discharge. Alright? So yeah, penile discharge. So would you consider, all right, so I'll give you guys something to think about. Would you consider females as just carriers of Neisseria gonorrhoeae and they don't suffer the disease like a disease like tulo? Grabe ka naman sa mga babae. Valiant, grabe ka naman. No? Hindi. Kasi nga, di ba meron silang cervicitis? Pwede din. Kaya talaga, hindi lang sila carriers. May pinagdadaanan din sila. Okay? May pinagdadaanan. Hindi ibig sabihin nun, Eliza, ha, na, for example, may jowa ka in the near future, right? May jowa ka in the near future na hindi ko alam ha kung ano ginawa niya. Seaman, for example, kasi usually, alam natin yan, most of the time seaman yan. No? For example, nagseaman si Segi, di ba? Ganon. Example, nagseaman si Segi, nagkatuluyan kayo ni Segi. Alright? Theoretically, hindi ko sinasabing mangyayari ha. Huwag kang charotera, Eliza ha. Kung nag-aaral tayo dito. Ano, okay? Theoretically, nagseaman siya. Tapos syempre, people get experimental when they go abroad and they're alone without their spouses. So, sometimes nakakuha siya. So, pwede ka magkaroon ng ano. Iba yung UTI, urinary tract infection. For example, iba yung you guys know the anatomy naman, there's three holes when you look at the female anatomy naman, 'di ba? So yun nga, when we get to that point where, for example, a woman is infected with the organism, there's a tendency that it might go to the cervix. Okay? So that's why cervicitis yun. So hindi siya basta carrier. Although mas less ang clinical symptomology as opposed to males kasi nga pag umihi ang lalaki, 'di ba? Ang urethra kasi ng lalaki is doon din ang daanan ng ano, doon din daanan ng ano natin ng, for example, what do you call this, the reproductive cells ng lalaki. So, 'di ba? Ganon. Medyo chill yung example ko kasi para hindi tumawa yung mga lalaki kasi yung mga lalaki dito masyadong green, 'di ba? Buti pa yung anak ko. Yung anak ko ano 'yan ha? Yung mga anak ko ano 'yan, innocent 'yan. Wait, tingin na close up, hindi ko makita, nakaharang yung pangalan mo. Ayan, o 'di ba ganun, ganun. Ayan, o. Mamaganda ka. Nakakaloka ka. Pero gusto ko yan. Nakakatuwa yan. Alright. Now, let's talk about eye infections from newborns infected with, from newborns who are born from mothers infected with Neisseria gonorrhoeae. Of course, huwag niyo kakalimutan yung sinabi ko last week. Ano yan? Ophthalmia neonatorum. Okay? And the preventive measure that we do here is Creed's prophylaxis. Traditionally, we use 1% silver nitrate, but now but now they use chlorhexidine. Okay? Chlorhexidine. Kakatanong ko lang dun sa mga OB nurses. Kasi alam ko dadaan tayo dyan. Actually, 5 minutes ago, may dumaan na OB nurse dito. Sabi ko, gumagawa pa rin pa ba kayo ng Creed's prophylaxis? Yes, madam. Madam talaga ang tawag sa akin. Nagagalit ako pag tinawag nila ako, sir. Yes, madam. Ang gamit na. Anong gamit nyo? 1% silver nitrate pa rin. Sabi niya, hindi na. Luma yun. That's actually traditional nursing methodologies daw. Traditional nursing intervention daw. That's now, what they use now is a combination of iodine and chlorhexidine na daw. So, tandaan nyo yan, ha? Okay? Okay? Ophthalmia neonatorum. So, for example, ayan na nga si Eliza. Na-jaundice si Eliza. Theoretically, wala akong mahanap kasi na jowa mo eh. Puro babae tayo dito, dalawa lang ang lalaki. Mamaya si Arnie, hanap tayo ng ibang babae naman na iba. Theoretically lang po ha, hindi ko kayo siniship. Huwag kayong itsusera diyan. Okay? So yun nga. So for example, na-jaundice si Eliza, nabuntis si Eliza. Example. And meron siyang ongoing infection of Neisseria, or she has gonorrhea. She currently has gonorrhea. So, nabuo si baby and everything, blah, blah, blah. Since mild nga ang symptomology niya in females, medyo hindi niya napansin. Malay ko ba, used talaga na si Eliza malagkit sa ibaba. O, wala pa kailam, di ba? Ganon. So, hindi niya nahalata. So, si baby, pwedeng mapunta sa eyes niya. Kaya, ophthalmia neonatorum. So, paglabas niya, syempre, saan ba dadaan si baby? Syempre, dadaan siya sa cervical cavity, dadaan din siya sa unless, of course, it's a it's a cesarean birth, then we don't have anything to worry about. Although may problema tayo doon in terms of closing up the woman kasi nga may infection si mother, but that's another story. So passageway niya is of course yung ice yung mauuna, syempre mahahawi yung infected area, right? Ng female. Kaya yan piniprevent natin. Bakit? Kasi nakakabulag siya. Okay? Now, let's go to Neisseria meningitidis. Okay? Meningococcemia is associated with Neisseria meningitidis. Meningococcemia associated with Neisseria meningitidis is transmitted through what? Ayan na. Isa sa mga pinag-usapan natin last week din. Sige. Nigel.
Inhalation.
Sorry? I didn't quite hear that.
Inhalation. Inhalation po.
Can you go closer? Can you speak closer to your microphone? I'm terribly sorry. I'm not.
Inhalation po.
Inhalation. All right. What's another way of you getting Neisseria meningitidis? Another way? Anybody? Alexis.
Close contact po.
Very good. All right. So inhalation and close contact are possible ways of you contracting meningococcemia. All right. So now let's talk about meningitis a little bit more. Now, what age group do you think meningitis from Neisseria meningitidis is common in? Again, we have neonates. Okay, neonates. Neonates ba? Sige. Children under 3 years old. Okay? Under 3 years old. Okay? Tama ba? May nagtaas ng kamay, sorry. Nigel, anong sagot mo? Do you agree with me? Children under 3 years old also? Okay? Pero wait, meron follow-up question si Sir Manuel. Bakit nung nagkaroon ng outbreak sa Ilocos Norte, I'm not sure if it's Ilocos Norte or Ilocos Sur, bakit nagkaroon ng ng outbreak na infected din ang mga older people, adults to be exact. Because the organism has what? Nigel.
Sir, sorry, napindot lang po.
Napindot mo lang, akala ko naman sasagot ka, nakakabwisit ka naman. Gigigil ako sa iyo. Di naligo ang mga tao, okay? Bakit? Sige. Diba sabi, akala ko sir under 3 years of age. Pero bakit doon sa question mo naka-isolate pa din yun sa may ano? Bakit? Kasi alam ko yan, Sir Marco, may magtatanong eh. Alam ko yan, Sir Marco, kasi laging kinokontest yung mga question ko eh. Kasi last year pa lang, no, Sir Marco, kinokontest lagi yung credibility ng question, yung case analysis ko, di ba?
Usually, pag nakita nila yung sagot,
Oo.
nabagsak sila,
Tapos
doon lang
nakalimutan
sila
nila
magko-contest.
pala. Kasi, what? Kasi, ano? Sige, Maria Cristina Sabado. Epidemiology question to actually. Pero sige, go.
Kasi sir, napapass nga po siya through inhalation and close contact.
Very good. Pero ano nga ang reason? Although, yeah, we know that one, right? What? After exam, magko-contest mga yan. Oo, expected ko yan. Humanda kayo doon sa magko-contest. Siguraduhin ninyo na may backing kayo with academic ano ha. Binabalaan, sir. Binabalaan, no, Sir Marco. Sige. Wala na? Siret? Siret na tama ka, ano, Maria? Yeah, you're correct. Kaya nga siya tinawag na outbreak kasi nga, dikit-dikit sila, di ba? So, epidemiologically wise, the organism has already created enough numbers to form colonies on other people aside from children. Okay? Lalo na yung mga caregivers na yan, di ba? Usually, pag initial infection, for example, there's one particle, do you think you would get it if you're an adult? Of course not. Pag sinabing ganyan, yan yung si patient zero mo. Yung unang-unang patient. Okay? For example, sobrang onti lang ng colony forming units. Of course, kung healthy individual ka katulad ni ayoko si Valiant kasi may mga ano yan eh, may mga other activities yan na we should not talk about in this particular lecture. Maria Cristina Sabado naman yung example ko. Kung healthy living ka, nagyo-yoga ka, nagpipilates ka every day, you are eating a keto-based diet, mga ganon, more on avocado and peanuts. Uric acid yung tataas sa'yo, pero what else? Um, hindi ka ma-infect yung dalawang particles lang ng ano, dalawang colony forming particles lang ng ano, 'di ba? Ng Neisseria meningitidis. Pero sa baby, nakatulad ni Alexis, yung anak ko kasi bata pa siya ng anak ko pa yan si Alexis, 'di ba? Nagbe-breastfeed pa yan sa akin si Alexis. Pwede siyang ma-infect, 'di ba? So yun yung tinatawag natin na ano, yung patient zero. Usually makikita nyo yan sa balita, laging sinasabi, nagsimula sa isang bata na nasa isang barong-barong sa purok ganto-ganto. 'Di ba? Every time na may balita, ganun. Kasi doon nila natitrace kung sino yung una. So, malalaman nyo yan kaagad pa. So kaya pala, kaya nila na-detect kaagad. Ah, okay, ganon. Kasi meron siyang tier kung sino yung unang-una. So, for example, si baby pa si Alexis, baby ko pa siya, nagbe-breastfeed pa lang siya sa akin. She's around 2 years old. And then there happens to be some other baby that got that's already been infected with Neisseria meningitidis. Hindi pa lang nagpapakita nung forms ng meningitis. That's the time that she might get infected. Diba? So at the time, travel kasi kami, nagpunta kami sa Europe sa ano, sa Zimbabwe. Ganyan, nag-tour kami doon. Wala lang, trip lang namin dalawa. Ganon. 'Di ba? Kasama namin yung isa kong toddler na anak na si Valiant. Bakla-bakla na yan doon, bata pa lang. Okay? Nakasuot siya ng fairy wings tsaka yung Ariana hat niya, ay Ariana Grande earphones na katulad ko. Ganon. Okay? So wag kayong masyadong pakampante na pag example, ang binigay na question is ganito. Sir, di ba 3 years old? Ganun, 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 ganun. Che, huwag niyo akong etusin. Pwedeng magkaroon ng infection sa mga ano. It doesn't necessarily mean that the older and the more immunocompetent the person, the more likely he or she is going to get the disease. Okay? Now, let's go with meningitis accompanied with what sign is presumptive of meningococcemia. So we're talking about we're talking about the clinical symptomology. All right? So clinical symptomology na tayo. Meningococcemia with what? Pag nakita nyo sa may, ano ko to, sa case analysis ko. Actually, isa ata to sa mga case analysis ko last year. Malay nyo, baka trip ko, itanong ko ulit. What is the pathognomonic mnemonics na naman to. So, Amanda, listen up. Baka mamaya maano mo na naman. Maalala mo. Alright? So, what is, ano lagi yun? Yung, may signs and symptoms siya ng meningitis. Pero, what makes meningococcemia different from other forms of meningitis is because there is scattered petechiae. All right, scattered PTK. This could be paraphrased as small pinpoint lesions or small brown lesions at the backside of the body, mga ganon. Baka baliktarin ko, ibahin ko yung wording ko, 'di ba? Baka ibahin ko. 'Di ba? So tandaan nyo, may scattered PTK. What is PTK ba? Have you guys done the bleeding time test for it's called I think I'm not sure what it's called now. I'm not. I haven't been. We don't use this anymore in the hospital because we already have antigen screening. But it's where you put a tourniquet. A tourniquet. All right. When you put a tourniquet there and you leave it there for like a minute or 30 seconds. I'm not sure how much. It was when I was in nursing school. I don't know the exact name of the technique, but when you leave it there, you will see small splotches. Okay? Bakit? Ano ba kasi ang problema kapag ka nagkakaroon ng PTK? It's the blood flow is what? The blood flow is impeded and you don't have a lot of platelets, and therefore you form small islands of blood. Like small islands of blood there that could be seen in the skin. So that's scattered PTK. So all over the body siya. So now, the most important thing that you need to remember, of course, is hemorrhagic bleeding associated with meningococcemia because it affects the adrenal glands. Okay? And this is known as Waterhouse-Friderichsen syndrome. All right? It was a question when I was a student. Okay? Waterhouse-Friderichsen syndrome is a hemorrhagic disease or is a hemorrhagic form of bleeding associated with which of the following microorganisms? Binigay si Haemophilus influenzae, binigay din si binigay din si Streptococcus pneumoniae, tapos nilagay si Feingoldea magna, tapos may nakalagay doon, Neisseria meningitidis. Diba? So, sinong pipiliin mo? Waterhouse-Friderichsen is, of course, associated with Neisseria gonorrhoeae. Diba? So, wag mo kakalimutan. Malay mo, lilituhin lang kayo ng mga examiner. Diba? Nililito lang kayo. Pero sa akin, pag ako ang gagawa ng exam, alright? Pag ako ang gagawa ng exam, hindi ko salagay na Waterhouse-Friderichsen syndrome. Ilalagay ko kung ano yung symptoms ng Waterhouse-Friderichsen tsaka yung clinical presentation ng Waterhouse-Friderichsen. And that is for you to find out. Okay? That is your assignment. Itatanong ko next week. Alright? Now, there are there are five types rather of Neisseria meningitis. Not three types. Five types. Okay? Dinagdagan ko siya, I think, last year. Not sure. Um, don't forget, it's A, B, C, Y, and W. Right? So, yun yung biotypes niya. And meningitis biotype A, biotype B, biotype C, biotype Y, and biotype W. Okay? What's the main difference? That's of course serological differences. Okay? Biotypes. Okay? Now, specimens that are useful for Neisseria meningitidis or meningococcemia diagnosis. This is very important for you guys. Can you guys give me an exam? Can you guys give me the three specimens that are needed for the diagnosis of meningococcemia? Sige, magtatawag ako ulit. Sige, magtatawag ako. Sige. What about Marivic Sastre? Yung binigyan ko ng points kanina. Ng extra points. Marivic
Yes
Sastre.
po.
Okay. Can you give me an answer to the slide in front of you? Hello?
Hello po, sir.
Okay. Medyo tulog pa ata si Marivic. I'm sorry for disturbing your sleep. I'm terribly sorry. Okay, so what sample or what specimen do you need for the diagnosis or that may be useful or that are useful for the diagnosis of meningococcemia? Give me an answer. No lang, there's three. Don't worry. Merong mag-steal? Papayag ka na mag-steal si Alexis?
Sige po, sir.
All right. Okay, let's move to Alexis. All right, Alexis, can you give me one? Anak.
Cerebrospinal fluid,
Ay,
sir.
kumpleto talaga. Nagsi-flex talaga siya. Talagang tinatambalan niya yung firstborn ko. Talaga, nako. Humanda ka talaga, Valiant, ha? Your position as heir to the Iron Becky throne is being contested. Okay? All right. So, yeah, that's correct. Cerebrospinal fluid. Aside from that one, balik kayo dun sa ano, balik kayo sa um, pinag-usapan natin kanina. How do you acquire the organism or how do babies age less than 3 get it? Di ba? O sige, Maria Cristina K. Sabado, McKay.
Swab po.
Okay, what
Nasal
type of
swab.
swab? Alam mo ako, gusto ko na specifics. Baka mamaya penile swab yan, ha? Sasakalin kita, girl.
Ang nasal swab po, nasopharyngeal swab.
Okay. Nasopharyngeal swab. Okay. All right. Okay, the last one. Sige. Another one. Ito talaga ha, mga medtech, nakalimutan na yung our bread and butter as medtechs. Dugo. Kayo talaga. Siyempre, unahin mo pa. Tagal nang tumubo niya mga yan. Siyempre, di ba? Kayo talaga, magsisirological study na lang tayo, di ba? Meron tayong anti-meningococcal antibodies. Kayo talaga nakalimutan yan. Dugo, di ba? That's our bread and butter, oh. CSF, blood, nasopharyngeal swab. Actually, in suspected cases of meningococcemia, immediately they would collect blood and nasopharyngeal swab. Unless, of course, the symptoms of meningitis has been seen in the patient, or there is evidence of meningitis has been presented by the patient. they would not collect CSF first. Why? Kasi baka mamaya ano siya, some other type of disease or manifestation. So usually, for example, exposed lang. For example, si Valiant, nagkasama ko kasi, for example, nagpunta kami ng Zimbabwe nga, di ba, magbuong pamilya. Kasama ko, bit ko si Alexis. Si Alexis, meron ng ano, kaming dalawa ni Alexis, meron na kaming ano, meron na nakolektahan na sa aming dalawa. Tapos exposed lang naman si Valiant. So, unang kukunin sa kanya is blood and nasopharyngeal swab to detect the microorganisms. Saka kami ni Alexis, tsaka yung kalaguyo ko, siyempre pupunta ka ng Zimbabwe doon, ano nga alam ang gagawin ko doon, dala-dala ko lang ang anak ko. Siyempre hahanap ako ng kalaguyo ko doon, na-expose ako, o 'di ba? Ay nagkaroon ako ng signs and symptoms of meningitis, kukuha na ako ng CSF. Pero it depends again on the policies and procedures of the hospital. But most of the time, the first line for patients who have been exposed or possible exposure to meningococcemia, nasal pharyngeal swab, and blood. Okay? All right. Now, let's move on to the actual things that you would be doing in the lab when it concerns Neisseria. Um, for Neisseria, you have four media that you may use for isolation. You may use, hindi pwedeng gusto mo. Kung trip mo lang, marami, mayaman, may laboratory, for example, si Ronilyn, 15 years from now, she would be the head of a laboratory in the Philippines. And gusto ko yung sinabi ni Sir Manuel, apat na culture media for the isolation of Neisseria species ang gagamitin namin. So you can use Thayer Martin. You can use modified Thayer Martin. You can use Martin Lewis or the NYC agar. Siniship pa from New York City agar, yung agar ni Ronelyn, di ba? Napatayo si Ronelyn. Ano kala ko, nag-ano lang ako. Nagbabubble pop lang ako. Naglalaro lang ako ng bubble pop dito. Tinawag ako ni Sir Manuel. Nagulat ako. Kasali din pala ako sa usapan. Nagulat si Ronelyn. Natawa ako na pag ganun siya sa upuan niya, napatayo siya. Di ba? Ganon. So, yun yung four. Now, what are the antibiotic contents of each? So, don't forget that vancomycin is evident in all of this as well as colistin. Okay? Wag niyong kakalimutan. Vancomycin at saka colistin ang important dito sa sa mga culture media na to. Bakit? Bakit sa tingin nyo, vancomycin at saka colistin? Ano ba ang purpose nito mga to? This is to prevent the growth of gram-positive organisms. Okay? Piniprevent niya ang pag-grow ng mga gram-positive organisms. Specifically, Cocci. Vancomycin is the most important antibiotic for the prevention of your what? Strep and staph. Okay? So, colistin, gram-positive, bacilli lang prevent niya. So, wag niyo kakalimutan, all of this has antibiotics, but all of this have one thing in common. All of them have vancomycin and colistin. So, sir, anong pinagkaiba ng iba? Yan na. Saka natin tandaan, Thayer Martin has nystatin aside from vancomycin and colistin. For modified Thayer Martin, wala lang, modify lang. Gusto ko lang dagdagan. Nagawin ko ng trimetoprim, di ba? Trimetoprim sulfomethoxazole. Okay? Bakit? Ano ba yung trimetoprim sulfomethoxazole? Saan ba siya ginagamit? For organisms that are what? Mycobacterium. Okay? Modified Thayer Martin. Kasi baka mamaya may mga mycobacterium na exposed. Meron kasi tayong mycobacterium na tumutubo even in these kinds of conditions. So, trimetoprim is added there. What about modified Martin Lewis? Trimetoprim and anisomycin. Alright? Para hindi tumubo ang what? Anisomycin. Siya sa ginagamit. Pag nakita nyo may mycin, usually other than vancomycin and other things like that, this prevents the growth of what? Of fungi. Okay? Amphotericin. Basically, it prevents the growth of anything except for Neisseria species. So sa tingin ko pwede natin gamitin lahat. Diba? Just to rule out several things. Pero you may use it, you may not use it. Depends on the policies of your hospital. Okay? So, Ronelyn, it depends on you kung anong gusto mo. Kung gusto mo apat, sige, go. Why not? But these are the things that you may possibly use, and that's the difference of all of these four culture media specific for Neisseria species. Okay? Cool? Cool? All right. Let's move on. Now, differentiate the following. based on fermentation of growth. Huwag niyo kakalimutan na GML. Okay? GML, GML. Ayan na. Ito na naman, Amanda. Amanda, nandyan ka pa ba? Kasi mahilig ka sa mga mnemonics at saka sa mga shortcut kung paano aralin. Amanda, are you still there? I want to hear your voice. Amanda, kung nandyan ka, galawin mo ang glass. Ay, ayan na, nagulat ako, gumagalaw ang glass.
Ginawa ko na po.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Amanda, wag mo kakalimutan ang GML ha. Gonorrhea, meningitis, and lactamica. I want you to arrange it like that as well. Same process. Para nakatato na sa utak mo. Okay? Isulat mo na kaagad sa papel kapag ka nakakita ka ng Neisseria questions. GML. Okay? Tapos, GML vertically, GML horizontally. Kasi ganito ang itsura. Oh, totoo, sir. Inayos mo talaga siya for me. Thank you so
Ala,
much,
sir, nakaayos
ha.
na.
Oh, di ba? Tingnan niyo ang itsura. Oh, parang hagdanan. Di ba? Oh, ayan na ha. Amanda ha. Alam ko matutuwa ka sa mga ganyan. Kasi konti lang ang
Maraming
memorize
salamat
mo.
po.
Happy ka na, Amanda?
Sobrang happy po.
Oh, di ba? Parang hindi siya happy. Sobrang happy po. Parang ganun. Grabe
Sobrang happy po.
Grabe ang level of elation ni Amanda. Hindi namin expected na ganyan ang reaction mo. I love it. Okay, so tama, tandaan niyo ha, GML, GML. Same process. Para hindi niyo makalimutan. Kasi these are questions that are usually asked in the board exam. Okay? Okay ba? GML, GML, GML. Pero baka mamaya nakalimutan yung ibig sabihin ng GML ha. Sasampalin ko kayo talaga. Kalimutan gonorrhea, meningitis, lactamica. Okay? Glucose, maltose, lactose. 'Di ba? GML, GML, horizontally and vertically. 'Di ba? Okay ba, Valiant? Okay ba? And then, huwag niyong kakalimutan na hagdanan lang ng positive. Positive kasi sa glucose lahat. 'Di ba? Kaya nga presumptive diagnosis, presumptive fermentation. Fermentation is presumptive of anything that grows with, or anything that grows, anything that's gram-negative cocci. Okay, is Neisseria immediately to many to any microbiologists. Okay, tas nag-positive pa sa superoxole. O ano 'yon? Neisseria meningitis, Neisseria gonorrhea, or lactamica. Of course, Neisseria gonorrhea. Tapos i-check mo maltose at saka lactose, di ba? Gets nyo? Negative, negative. Okay? Okay. Carry ba? Carry, naintindihan? Mas madaling maalala, di ba? Hindi katulad hindi
Yes, ma'am.
katulad dun sa mga previous notes namin, sir. Walang mga pattern. Sometimes you just gotta look at the patterns, people. Okay? You just gotta look at the pattern. Alright? Okay. Now, what's next? Now, what's next is to confirm the identification of lactamica. Another sugar fermentation test is usually done. This one, makulit talaga si lactamica, ayaw talaga niyang magpaano. Ayaw niya talagang magpatalo. OMPG. You need to do ONPG test. Orthonitrophenyl glucosidase. Okay? Orthonitrophenyl glucosidase. Alright? Now, base media used for testing of sugar fermentation is of course your peptone broth or cysteine trypticase broth. So, paano ba ginagawa, sir, yung ano? Paano ba ginagawa, sir? I know you guys are thinking. I know yun ang iniisip ninyo. Wala kayong ibang iniisip kundi paano ginagawa ang sugar fermentation na yan. Magdadagdag ka lang ng solution doon sa mga broth na yan. Okay? And then yung mga yan, meron yung phenol red, lalo na si peptone broth. May phenol red siya. What will happen if glucose, lactose, or maltose added to a bottle of not a bottle, I would call it a vial of peptone broth, and then there is a glucose fermenter. Remember, your color indicator is phenol red. What's the positive result if it's a fermenter? Ganon yung mga tanungan ko. Alexis, sige.
Yellow po.
Very good. Bakit? Ano ba nangyayari kapag ka nagkakaroon ng fermentation? What happens to a culture media when there's fermentation of a sugar? Nigel,
Nagiging acidic po.
very good. And what is your color indicator? Phenol red. It reacts to what? It becomes yellow when the conditions or the environment inside the culture media or the culture media is acidic. So, di ba? Ganun. Okay. Alright. Di ba? Dali-daling alalahanin, di ba? Di ba? GML. O, di ba? Naloka kayo. First time nyo. First time nyo narinig yung GML. Di ba? Amanda, first time mo narinig yung GML. Ready na si Amanda. Pagdating yung GML lang yung naalala ni Amanda. GML lang yung nag-stick kay Amanda. Nakakaloka. Hindi nagtanong si Sir Manuel lang related sa GML. Naloka siguro si Amanda nun. Naloka siguro si Amanda.
Yun lang naalala ko, sir.
Oo, nakalimutan na niya yung ales. May mga ales pa siya. Huwag mo kalimutan yung ales, ha? Huwag mo kalimutan. Ales with H yun, ha? Ako nakalimutan ni Amanda
Yes
din
po,
yung
sir.
ales. Diba? Ang reyna ng mnemonics. I dub the queen of mnemonics. Diba? Alright. Now, most culture media used for identification of Neisseria species is basically what enrichment media. What enrichment media? Okay, base culture media siya. Um, Tagalogin na natin. Huwag natin pahirapan yung sarili natin, guys. Itong apat, sandali. Itong apat na to ay ano? Ano ang base culture media nito? Itong apat na to. Bigyan ko kayo ng chance. Sige. Lahat kayo search nyo Thayer Martin sa Google tapos image search ang i-click nyo. Sige, go. Gusto ko may nakikita ko nagtatype. Ronaldin, wag kang sumandal. Gusto ko mag-type ka, Ronaldin, ha? Ronaldin, wag kang sumandal. Eliza, ha? Ay, ayan, si Eliza pala nagtatype. Sorry, Eliza. Sorry, Eliza. Alright? Search nyo. Search nyo. Any of those three. Thayer Martin, search nyo. Anong makikita nyo? Image search. Sige. Mark, what do you see? What do you
Blood
see?
po.
Sige, describe mo lang kung anong itsura niya.
Chocolate, brown.
Chocolate talaga? Anong klaseng chocolate? Milk chocolate, brown chocolate, or dark chocolate?
Parang medyo brown chocolate po.
Brown chocolate. So, anong ibig sabihin? It's chocolate agar. So, ang basis nila is chocolate agar. Gets? Dinagdagan lang ng vancomycin, colistin, at saka nystatin. Alright? Gets? Yun yung tinatanong ng question na yan. Baka mamaya nalito kayo. Bakit ganyan yung mga tanungan, sir? Kasi binabago-bago lang siya. Okay? And take note that this is actually a question that was taken from the board exam recall question. So please be mindful, okay? This is a board exam recall question. Kung meron kayong dapat tandaan, you have to remember this one, okay? Now, aside from antibiotics, what other components may be present or are present in this media? Of course, don't forget isoVitalex and hemoglobin. Important for the growth of these organisms. Otherwise, it's very hard for you guys to isolate these organisms. Kasi nga, ano nga siya ulit, Nigel? Starts with the letter F. These are organisms that are what?
Fastidious organisms.
Very good. O, diba? Anong ibig sabihin ng fastidious in Tagalog? Kung isa kang nagtatrabaho sa micro? Starts with the letter F.
Maart.
Maarte. Katulad ni Valiant. Hindi. Si Sir Manuel. Baliw kayo. Sir Manuel. Nagmana lang sa akin yun si Valiant. Hindi ba nga anak? Anak ko yan. Di ba anak? Nagmana ka lang sa kaartihan ko, anak. Si Alexis lang yung hindi talaga, sa lahat ng mga naging anak ko, si Alexis lang yung hindi maarte. Nagbe-breastfeed siya kahit walang laman yung breast ko. Di ba ganon? Di ba? Di ba? Ganon. Ginagawa na natin ng story ang family natin. Di ba? Ganon. Alright? Now, genital mycoplasma may also be cultivated in what media? Sir, ano na naman yan? Bakit merong mycoplasma? Di ba ano? Baka kasi hindi natin madaanan si mycoplasma at si ureoplasma. So at least may idea kayo na tumutubo siya sa NYC medium. Okay? Kasi kailangan niya ng, ano nga laman ng NYC medium? Sige nga, kung naalala. Sige. Ano nga? Tandaan nyo yung mga ano ha. Tandaan nyo yung mga antibiotics noon. Kayo talaga ha, class. What's the antibiotics? Sige. Ayan na, lumalabas ulit si James Paul. James Paul, what are the antibiotics present in NYC agar, the New York City agar? Lumabas si James Paul kasi baka mamaya may price ulit, madagdagan ng cash price ko. Ganyan yan si James Paul kapag mahihirap ang mga question. Lumalabas. Nagpapakita. James Paul, may shootang pa ako sa'yo. Huwag mong kalimutan. Don't worry, hindi ko nakakalimutan. Nagbakasyon na nga ano ko eh. What are the antibiotics? What are the antibiotics? O sige, anak, ayan talaga na ako kino-contest talaga ang kagalingan ng firstborn ko. Sige, what are the contents? Antibiotics lang, antibiotics.
Vancomycin, colistin, nystatin, trimethoprim, amphotericin.
Napasobra ka naman. Trimethoprim, amphotericin, and colistin, and vancomycin lang. But meron ka pang extra. Ito talaga ha. O dagdag mo na yung Isovitalex. Ito talaga, sumobra ka pa. Inaantok na si Mark Segi. Huwag kang mag-alala, malapit na tayong matapos. Hold on lang. Alright, now, this is a Neisseria species or an organism under the Neisseria family or Neisseriae family that has the same sugar fermentation characteristics as Neisseria meningitidis. This is what? This is, you have the same fermentation characteristics. This is what? Is, is, sorry, inubo. Sorry, inubo. Anybody? Anybody?
Leucocell.
Neisseria subflava. Okay? The same sugar medium, sugar fermentation results, but can grow in 25 degrees Celsius. What's 25 degrees Celsius? Room temperature. Okay? Alright? Room temperature. So, cold loving siya. Alright, now, cold loving tuloy. Mesophilic. Mesophilic pala. Okay. Now, gram-negative organisms can grow on 5% sheep agar, which are less fastidious. Alright, so we're talking about other less fastidious organisms. So we have three. I'm not going to I'm not going to delve with this a little bit deeper. Neisseria meningitidis is less fastidious. Saprophytic Neisseria is also capable of growing on sheep blood agar and Moraxilla. Okay, Moraxilla. Okay. Another term for Moraxilla, the previous genera or sorry, assignment of Moraxilla. What's the other term? Sinabi yon ni Valiant last time. Naalala ko yon. Siyempre, anak ko yan eh. What's the other term or the other name of Moraxilla? The previous term. Ako si Valiant nakalimutan na. You are giving me several levels of disappointment, Valiant. you you are really disappointing me today, Bronhamella. Actually, the spelling is a little bit incorrect. Okay, Bronhamella. Let me just Google check. Maybe I'm wrong. Because it's been a long time since I heard Bronhamella. Actually, naabutan ko pa siya ng student ako, Bronhamella pa siya. So, hindi pa ganun katanda si Sir Manuel. Okay, get you, sir. Okay, so tama naman yung spelling ni ano, tama naman yung spelling ni Alexis. Okay? So don't worry not much about these things because it's very unlikely that you will be asked this question, but just in case. Okay? So less fastidious, Neisseria meningitidis, saprophyticus, and saprophytic Neisseria and Moraxilla. Okay? Subflava and elongata are considered to be saprophytic Neisseria. Okay? All right. Now let's move on to happen. All right, now let's move on to your next slide. Gram-negative cocci seen in lower respiratory infections. Lower respiratory infections. We have sorry, this is your Moraxella cataralis. Okay, the usual target of this age group is younger people. Okay, let's talk about Moraxella cataralis a little bit more. We use DNase test, and sugar fermentation to differentiate Moraxilla species from other gram-negative organisms because this is the only one that would test positive with DNase. Okay, and it would be incapable of sugar fermentation. So sometimes it would appear if it's as if it would usually appear in phlegm. Okay, it would appear in phlegm. No, not phlegm. Sorry, I don't like the term phlegm. Sputum. We'll use the word sputum. Okay, you would see it in sputum sometimes. So, sir, meron na serious sa ano, may tumubo na ano. Nag-direct gram stain ka muna before ka nag-process, di ba? So, We were able to gram stain Diplodocus also, similar looking microorganisms to, especially if you're not yet experienced in the field or in the practice, you might mistake this as Neisseria. So in order for you to differentiate it, you use sugar fermentation. And after sugar fermentation, after incubating it on a sugar-rich media like glucose, maltose, and lactose, you would not see any reaction, right? For Moraxilla cataralis. Okay, so after that, use DNA test just to confirm. Right now, all medically relevant gram-negative cocci are anaerobic except for two, Billionella and Moraxilla. Okay, Billionella and Moraxilla. Now, sugar fermented by Billionella is, of course, lactose only. All right. But make sure that they are aerobic. Okay, make sure it's aerobic. So, it's a facultative aerobe that's capable of fermentation. Diba, sir, lahat ng anaerobe, ano? No, not all the time. Okay? Hindi porke hindi gumagamit ng oxygen, hindi fermenter. Okay? So that's an incorrect assumption kasi marami akong mga students ganun magsagot. Pag sinabi na ano, oxidizer siguro siya. Oxidize ang gamit. Okay? So lactose lang ang fina-ferment niya. Right? Now, Legionella parvula is a species under it, and it's associated usually with infections such as osteomyelitis and endocarditis. So you might see a case here, and you might see a case here and there that says that it's a gram-negative cocci. Gram-negative cocci, anaerobic, grows in aerobic conditions, capable of fermenting lactose. Seen in a patient with seen in a patient with who suffered from a traumatic accident, include with a lot of spinal injuries as well as a broken femur. So ganon, osteomyelitis yun, nagkaroon ng infection sa bone, di ba? Ganon. And then I'm going to add another I'm going to add another one. I forgot to add this since last discussion with my other students, is that Villanella is capable of fluorescing under uh, under blue light. So be mindful of these things, okay? So don't forget, these are your gram-negative cocci, okay? Now we're going to move on with gram-negative bacilli, all right? We have 30 minutes left, so we're going deeper into microbiology, all right? The bulk of your examinations would usually come from um, would usually come from sorry, na-distract ako nung kasama ko na ano na Arabo. Akala ko anong gagawin. Magpe-pray pala siya. Sorry, sorry. Akala. No, I lost my train of thought. Nasa na ba ako? Majority of the questions that you will be asked will most likely come from gram-negative microorganisms. That's why my gram-negative microorganisms, specifically bacilli, kasi siya yung malaki ang content. Maraming content. So, I'll give you guys 15 minutes for a break. Again, 15 minutes. Di ba okay lang mag-extend ako, di ba, Mark? Kasi na-late ako. Okay lang ba yon? Or ako ang mag-adjust. Ikaw na late. Bahala ka, sir. Ganon. Di ba?
Mostly naman po siguro okay lang.
Okay naman. All right. So at least we are at an understanding. Thank you so much for understanding. All right. So that's the end of our lecture for this particular part. I'm going to stop streaming this one, so you guys have an idea. So you guys have some sort of uh chunk learning. So we get chunk learning here.